Throughout the world, a large array of weapons are designed to inflict maximum casualties and fatalities on enemy forces. Although nuclear weapons continue to be one of the greatest threats of the modern age, chemical weapons are a close second regarding their power, potency, and overall destructive capabilities. This video provides direct analysis of the 10 most powerful chemical weapons. From their introduction in the 1900s to the present day, this work examines their history, effectiveness on the battlefield, and the overall threat to both civilians and military personnel. 10. Mustard gas. Sulfur mustard, also known as mustard gas, is a highly potent chemical weapon first used by the German army during World War I against entrenched troops. Although rarely fatal, with less than 1% of individuals exposed to the gas dying, mustard gas is capable of incapacitating large numbers of people within 2 to 24 hours after exposure, leaving victims with severe skin, eye, and respiratory burns, usually first and second-degree burns. In more severe cases, the gas is known to cause permanent scarring, DNA damage, as well as complete blindness. 9. 3-quinoclidinobenzilate (BZ). 3-quinoclidinobenzilate, also referred to as BZ, is a highly potent chemical weapon first developed by the United States during the 1960s. First developed as a gastrointestinal medication, BZ was later rejected by pharmaceutical companies due to its suppression of the central nervous system and unintended side effects. In response, the United States military adopted BZ for its own use during the mid-1960s, creating weaponized forms of the chemical compound that were far more potent than its original formula. As an odorless chemical weapon, BZ acts relatively quickly, within 3 hours of exposure, suppressing the central nervous system and causing dizziness, confusion, hallucinations, erratic behavior, and loss of basic motor skills. Due to its ability to inhibit glandular secretions, BZ is also known to cause dry mouth as well as skin flushing. In cases involving extreme exposure, coma, seizures, tremors, acute renal failure, and death are common. 8. Ricin. Ricin is a highly potent chemical weapon derived from the seeds of castor bean plants. It is highly lethal to humans and was first developed by the United States military for use during the First World War in either bullets or toxic dust form. Despite being outlawed by the Hague Convention of 1899, the United States and Canada began further study of ricin during World War II, weaponizing the compound in cluster bomb trials, with the Soviet Union following suit with their own weaponized forms of ricin in the years that followed. Ricin is extremely potent, with a single milligram capable of killing an individual between 4 to 24 hours after exposure. Despite being easy to produce, however, ricin is deeply affected by temperature and weather conditions, making delivery of the substance, particularly through bombs or various weapons, a difficult process to achieve. As a result, ricin is often considered an effective tool for assassinations, rather than large-scale attacks on troops or populations. Although ricin is rarely used as a chemical weapon by modern nation-states and organizations, it remains one of the deadliest chemical agents devised by humans during the 20th century. 7. Chlorine gas. Although first discovered in the 1600s, chlorine gas was first used as a weapon during the First World War by Germany on April 22, 1915. During the Second Battle of Ypres, German forces deployed several thousand chlorine gas cylinders on the battlefield with devastating consequences. Nearly 2 French and Algerian divisions were wiped out by the yellowish-green gas, as the compound immediately began to burn, blind, and choke its victims. Wilfred Owen, a famous British poet from World War I, once equated chlorine gas to drowning, as he described the compound's victims as floundering like a man in fire or lime. Possessing a distinctive smell of peppers and pineapples, chlorine enters the respiratory system of its victims, causing severe damage to lung tissue within seconds. Due to the widespread availability of chlorine for sanitation purposes, the compound is easily obtainable and continues to pose a tremendous threat to individuals worldwide. 6. Phosgene CG. Phosgene gas is an extremely potent chemical weapon first used during the First World War. Used extensively by both sides of the conflict, Researchers estimate that nearly 80% of the Great War's gas attack victims died from the weapon. Known as the creeping death, phosgene is completely colorless and provides only a trace smell of corn or moldy hay after delivery, often taking its victims by surprise. Delivered via gas canisters, phosgene requires carbon monoxide and chlorine, both in the presence of charcoal, to activate. Once used, symptoms usually begin 24 hours later and include severe coughing, difficulty breathing, vomiting, nausea, blurry vision, burning eyes and throat, skin lesions, pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs, extremely low blood pressure, organ failure, in particular, the heart, and eventually death. 5. Sarin GB. Sarin gas is an extremely deadly chemical weapon and is classified as a nerve agent due to its toxicity and impact on the central nervous system of humans. Although originally created as a pesticide by Germany in 1938, the Nazis soon realized the deadly capabilities of the nerve agent and developed weaponized versions for warfare. Although sarin was thankfully never used during the war, the United States and Soviet Union began to develop stockpiles of weaponized sarin gas in the years that followed. Sarin is colorless and contains no odor, making it an ideal weapon for surprise attacks. When activated, the liquid-based agent rapidly evaporates, turning into a vapor, gas, that spreads throughout the nearby environment. The weapon is highly lethal and is capable of killing individuals within seconds. Sarin works by inhibiting an enzyme in humans known as acetylcholinesterase, which, in turn, causes an overstimulation of the body's muscles and glands, causing its victims to spasm uncontrollably. Depending on the amount of exposure, individuals often die within seconds, or upwards of a few hours in cases involving minor contact. Large doses, however, involve far more serious symptoms, including convulsions, paralysis, loss of consciousness, muscle spasms, complete respiratory failure, and death, in almost all cases. More recently, sarin gas has also been used by the Syrian Air Force against rebels and civilians near its Idlib province. To this day, the gas continues to be one of the deadliest chemical weapons ever designed. 4. SOMAN G. SOMAN is a man-made G-series nerve agent originally developed as an insecticide by Germany during 1944. As with sarin, however, SOMAN was never used against Allied forces, despite the fact that weaponized canisters of the gas were stockpiled for later use. SOMAN is naturally clear and colorless, like sarin, but possesses a mild odor comparable to that of mothballs or rotting fruit. The liquid-based nerve agent is activated with heat, causing it to form into a vapor, gas, that penetrates the surrounding environment. SOMAN works much like sarin, albeit at a far more lethal and persistent level, as it directly attacks the human enzyme known as acetylcholinesterase. In doing so, direct exposure, by skin or eye contact or inhalation, quickly causes the body's muscles and glands to convulse uncontrollably. During direct, severe exposure, however, victims immediately experience convulsions, followed by complete paralysis, loss of consciousness, complete respiratory failure, and death within minutes. 3. CYCLOSARIN. CYCLOSARIN is a G-series nerve agent developed shortly after the discovery of SOMAN, 1944. Considered 5 times deadlier than sarin gas, cyclosarin is incredibly lethal to humans and has been classified as a weapon of mass destruction by the United Nations. Although the agent shares numerous characteristics with its predecessors sarin and SOMAN, notably its colorless feature, cyclosarin is far easier to detect due to its sweet odor, similar to peaches. As with sarin and SOMAN, the nerve agent is known to actively attack the human enzyme known as acetylcholinesterase. 2. VX. VX chemical weapons are one of the most dangerous and powerful nerve agents developed in human history. First discovered by the United Kingdom during the 1950s, VX contains an odorless and tasteless mixture that is amber in color. Unlike other nerve agents of the past, however, VX is comprised of an oily liquid similar in consistency to motor oil. This oily concoction is crucial for its effectiveness as a weapon, as VX has one of the slowest evaporation rates of any chemical weapon in existence, and can contaminate a large area for several days, and for several months if conditions are relatively cold. As with sarin and SOMAN, VX is most effective when heated to high temperatures, causing the agent to form into a vapor, gas. Experts believe that VX is approximately 10 times more deadly than sarin, killing its victims within a matter of minutes through paralysis and finally respiratory failure. Even when exposed to lower levels of VX, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, states that individuals are not likely to survive a VX attack. 1. Novichok agents. Novichok, meaning newcomer in Russian, are a relatively new form of chemical weapons first developed at the end of the Cold War by Soviet scientists. Currently, Novichok agents are considered the most potent and deadly chemical weapons ever designed in history. Designed under the Soviet program known as Foliant, former Russian scientists claim that 5 separate variants of the Novichok were developed between 1971 and 1993, and are estimated to be approximately 8 times more powerful than VX, and more than 10 times more deadly than SOMAN. Although little is known about these weapons, they are believed to be nerve agents that affect the muscles and glands by suppressing human enzymes, similar to VX, sarin, SOMAN, and CYCLOSARIN. Convulsions and disruptions to the neuromuscular system are believed to be common symptoms with Novichok exposure, with respiratory failure and cardiac arrest following soon after, due to the heart no longer being able to function properly. Exposure is almost always fatal. Even in cases where only small traces of the Novichok agent have come into contact with humans, such as the 1987 Novichok accident in a Moscow laboratory, Andrei Zelezyakov, the Russian scientist who was exposed only to trace amounts of the agent's residue, was permanently disabled from the accident, suffering from severe cirrhosis of the liver, epilepsy, depression, and an inability to read, write, or concentrate in the years that followed. He later died in July of 1992, only 5 years after his brief exposure to the agent. In contrast to prior chemical weapons, the Novichoks are reportedly capable of being delivered via aerosol, gas, liquids, or powdered form on board artillery shells, missiles, and bombs with lethal consequences. Despite Soviet claims that all Novichoks and their production facilities were dismantled at the end of the Cold War, the recent murders of Russian citizens abroad by Novichok agents, including the 2018 attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal, has led the United States and other Western countries to believe that the weapons are still in use by the Russian Federation's security services.